just wanted to know, do these juvenile Arctic cod, do they actually associate with the ice at this time of year?
So we're up here to study what's happening in this transition season. And one of the key things that happens from the ocean's perspective is that the surface of the ocean freezes.
I'm Franz Mütter, fisheries oceanographer in Juneau at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. I was really interested in Arctic cod. One of the things we wanted to find out is, do they associate with sea ice as soon as the ice starts forming in the fall? The life history in this part of the world we know very little about, and that's part of the reason why I was really interested in studying Arctic cod here. And we didn't really have a way of sampling them in the winter under the ice. I was aware of the suit, the surface and under ice trawl that Hauke had originally helped develop to modify to catch fish. And then eventually we had some funding to enhance the fishing capability of this vessel, the Sikulaq, and we were able to have a net custom built for us.
Sikulaq is quite a new vessel. It was commissioned in 2015. It's a very well-used platform and a very nimble and flexible platform to have scientists come on board and be able to do their work.
The suit is essentially a bottom trawl, but upside down. So instead of being towed across the seafloor, it has floaters on the top that will always make it float on the top. And when there's ice above the water, it will glide at the underside of sea ice.
Yeah, and the key is really to get it under the ice. That's the difficult part.
Yeah.
Because it has a strong tendency to try to stay at the surface.
It is also shearing to the side of the ship in rather undisturbed waters, which helps to sample under the ice, but also in the open ocean samples a portion of the surface water that normally cannot be sampled with plankton or fishing nets.
We are just above the north slope of Alaska, and our latitude is about 70 degrees north.
The ship is ideally designed for this kind of work because the ice is relatively thin. It's an ice-capable vessel, and they can break through a couple feet of ice at a rate that we can still tow the net. It's kind of ideal for these conditions that we encountered here.
The ice is freezing very fast. That's the only thing that we have to be aware of. If we take too long time, it will create a thin layer of ice on our runway, and when we fish through that, we will just sample all that ice, and it will be a big bag full of ice that we get. The ship was so nice to create us a little runway that you can see here of open water in which we can run the suit up towards the ice. At the end of this runway, the ice makes a sharp hook of 90 degrees. That's what we want. And then hopefully it will smoothly dive under that ice edge, and then will be trawled under the ice for another 3/4 of a mile or so. And then there should hopefully be another open patch, according to the radar, where we can take it out. The weather is perfect. It couldn't be any better. The biology is perfect. We have lots of seals and birds around here, which means that there must probably be zooplankton and fish in the water they feed on, and that's what we are after.
Polar cod are key species of the Arctic marine ecosystem because they are massively abundant, and as such they are a rich food source of the Arctic seal species and a couple of bird species. So they essentially bring the carbon that is created at the base of the food web by algae and zooplankton up to the higher predators.
So we had to be very adaptable in terms of our sampling and fishing the net. But we did have 4 days of fairly concentrated fishing and developed a little bit of a routine. Deploy the net off the stern like you would any fishing net off a vessel, but the key difference is that the net has attachment points on one side of the frame only. And so when you deploy it off the stern and you're steaming along, the water will flow through the net, and that flow will help the net shear out to the side. And you hope to do all of that in open water and then enter the ice. and so then it dives under the ice and fishes. And then the retrieval, if all goes well, is easier than the deployment, perhaps. Not always, I'm sure, depending on how heavy the ice is or what you run into.
So we are now going backwards to get into the perfect position to deploy the surface and under ice trawl.
I think the dynamics among the scientists and the crew were really exceptional, I would say. Everybody was really respectful, and I think that made for a very positive working environment and for an environment where you can kind of solve problems on the fly. Everybody worked together really well to make it work on this boat, which was kind of remarkable.
The biggest challenge that we are now here in an autumn situation during freeze-up, which means underneath the ice there's constantly new ice forming, and this new ice consists of microscopic to millimeter-sized crystals that are forming in the water and drift slowly upwards. When we fish through this with a suit, we just collect all of them, which is why we very often had our cod ends full of slush ice, just like a slushy.
Not as tasty.
Yeah. Because this is water very close to the freezing point of about minus 1.9 Celsius. So that has caused us some difficulties, a lot of rinsing of the nets with the fire hose of the ship.
Yeah, we used fire hose so you could actually melt the ice fairly gently, keeping the fish and plankton cool. We had a GoPro in the net looking kind of upward forward, and some of the ice crystals looked like fish or little organisms coming into the net, so it looked like we were catching lots of stuff, but it was mostly ice crystals.
We have been working really hard with little sleep under harsh conditions, and it was really useful on this expedition that we have a big team, so we could simultaneously process these different size fractions of our catch.
I had very low expectations, and I made that very clear before the cruise. And I told everybody that if we catch a handful of fish, I'd be ecstatic. And we caught in the hundreds. The exciting thing is that we did catch them, because I mean, from a scientific perspective, whether you catch them or not, it's a result. But if you don't catch any, you never really know, is it because the net's not fishing properly, especially since we were filling up with ice? Are we doing something wrong? Or did we just happen to be in the wrong place? So the fact that we caught them is about the best result that we could expect. What we found was that there is a fair bit of chlorophyll still available, and also zooplankton coming up under the ice that the cod probably feed on, and so we did find Arctic cod that were presumably feeding under the ice. We did take the stomachs out, but at least some of them contained food, so we know they were eating at the time. That is what we hypothesized to begin with. They probably do come up under the ice, but still good to catch them.
For me, it was the same as for Franz. I had low expectations, and I was totally positively surprised to see that we catch them in 11 out of 11 trawls. We had Arctic cod, so I really hadn't expected that. And I think the idea that they associated with the sea ice at the end of the summer was well substantiated with these data. So that's one of the take-home messages. We also found some surprises from the zooplankton that we have in our catches. And there might be a story in that too, because under the ice, we actually found some species that are normally living at the seafloor or above the seafloor in shallow waters. and we found them under the ice in almost 2,500 meter water depth. And this, for me, was a really nice and unexpected results, and something I have not seen in the European Arctic.
And we still have a couple of years to go, really, to sort through all of this and figure out what we actually caught in terms of the zooplankton. The only critters that we have a fairly good handle on right now are the Arctic Cod, as we counted all of them. But there's a lot of zooplankton that were just put away and preserved in formalin that a colleague will sort through and identify as best as possible.